Buckle up, everybody, because today we're going deep into a really fascinating crossroads of history. We're talking about the very beginning of flight and some seriously groundbreaking Olympic moments. We've got articles and museum records, and honestly, some pretty unexpected connections. I'm thinking there will be some aha moments in this one. By the time we're done with this deep dive, you'll not only get how the Wright brothers did the seemingly impossible, but you also discover some Olympic events that totally changed history. All right, so let's rewind the clock back to December 17th, 1903. Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Picture this wind whipping around the Wright brothers as they get their homemade flying machine ready. It was called the Flyer. They're getting it ready for its very first flight. Can you believe that first flight was only 12 seconds long? It went a distance shorter than a football field. It's kind of crazy to think that something so short, so seemingly small at the time, would kick off a total revolution in how we travel.
You know what's really amazing? Those 12 seconds were the result of years and years. Years of research and experiments by the Wright brothers. They weren't just messing around in a garage. They were serious scientists. They built their own wind tunnel to test out different wing designs.
Hold on, a wind tunnel? That sounds super high-tech for the early 1900s.
Oh, it absolutely was revolutionary back then. It basically meant a controlled environment to study airflow, to study how air flowed over different surfaces. This let them study bird flight and even come up with the idea of propellers. Propellers as rotary wings to create thrust. Those guys were true visionaries, I'll tell you that.
So they basically created the tools they needed to understand flight itself.
Exactly. And they didn't just stop there. They documented everything meticulously. They created a whole body of work that would become the foundation for modern aeronautics.
It's amazing how those careful efforts, born from a windy beach in North Carolina, rippled out to shape the world we know today. Speaking of shaping the world, it's almost hard to imagine a time when women weren't allowed to compete in the Olympics.
I know, right? It just seems so outdated now. It wasn't until the 1900 Paris Games. That was the first time we saw women athletes competing. Even then, their choices were pretty limited. They could do tennis, sailing, croquet, equestrianism, and golf. It's pretty different from the variety we see in the Olympics today.
It's those first steps, though, that really opened the door for women athletes to eventually dominate on the world stage, like we've seen in recent years. Makes you think about all the amazing talent that was just pushed aside before those barriers were broken down.
Absolutely. And speaking of breaking down barriers, the 1936 Berlin Olympics were a powerful moment in history. Jesse Owens, an African-American athlete, he won 4 gold medals right there in front of Hitler, directly challenging the Nazis' whole idea of Aryan supremacy.
That must have been an incredibly tense and emotionally charged atmosphere.
You can only imagine. What people often forget about that story is the sportsmanship. The sportsmanship that Owens received from a German athlete named Liz Long during the long jump competition. Long actually gave Owens advice that helped him qualify, and the camaraderie they had just went beyond the politics of it all. It's a true example of the power of sports to bring people together.
That's such an amazing example of human connection.
Yeah.
Prevailing even in the face of such darkness. Those games were full of such stark contrasts.
Absolutely. Speaking of contrasting moments, how about we shift gears to a different kind of athletic achievement? The Paralympics. Did you know their origins are surprisingly recent?
Now that you mention it, I don't know much about their history at all.
Well, they were founded in 1948 by Sir Ludwig Guttmann. He was a neurologist who really believed in the power of sports for rehab. And the growth of the Paralympics has been phenomenal. Just look at the 2012 London Games. Over 4,000 athletes from 164 countries participated.
That's incredible. What a testament to how far we've come in recognizing and celebrating the abilities of all athletes. It really highlights the power of sport to go beyond limitations and inspire us all.
It definitely does. And speaking of inspiring moments, why don't we dig into some other surprising firsts from the Olympics? Ones that might just blow your mind.
Okay, I'm all ears. Hit me with those mind-blowing Olympic firsts. What's in store?
Okay, so let's start with the 1904 St. Louis Olympics. Not only were these games kind of overshadowed by the World's Fair that was happening at the same time, but they also had this thing called Anthropology Days.
Anthropology Days. That sounds interesting.
Well, it was unfortunately a reflection of the pretty messed up racist attitudes back then. They had separate sports competitions for minority groups, like pitting them against each other in things like mud fighting and greased pole climbing.
Wow. Looking back, it's a stark reminder of how far we've come in terms of social progress, but also how far we still have to go. It's incredible to think something like that was ever okay, even at the Olympics.
It really shows how the Olympics, even with their goal of global unity, haven't always lived up to those ideals. They reflect the complicated nature of our world, both the good and the bad.
Absolutely. And speaking of the darker side of history, we can't ignore the tragedy of the 1972 Munich massacre. Such a horrific act of terrorism that really shattered the image of the Olympics. That image of the Olympics as a safe haven from world conflict.
It was devastating, a reminder that even in moments when the world seems united, darkness can find a way in.
And sadly, that wasn't the only time violence touched the Games. We also saw the bombing at the 1996 Atlanta Games, reminding us that the pursuit of peace and harmony is an ongoing struggle.
It certainly is. But even with those dark chapters, there have also been moments of incredible hope and inspiration at the Olympics, wouldn't you say? Moments that show us the power of sports to break down barriers and bring people together.
Oh, for sure. The human spirit shines through even in the toughest situations.
Take the unified Korean team, for example. Marching together under one flag at the 2000 Sydney Games, even though it was brief, it was a powerful symbol of peace and reconciliation, a little glimmer of hope in the middle of political tension.
It's those moments of unity that make you believe in the power of the Olympics to bring people together. And speaking of unity, we can't forget about inclusivity. We were talking earlier about the first women competing in the Games. The Paralympics are another great example of how the Olympics have evolved to embrace athletes of all abilities.
It shows how the definition of what it means to be an Olympian has changed over time. Sir Ludwig Guttmann, the guy who started the Paralympics, had such a profound vision. It's truly inspiring to see the Paralympic movement become this global phenomenon.
It is. It makes you realize that the potential of the human spirit is limitless. And it's not just in athletics.
Mm.
Speaking of pushing limits, we were talking about the Wright brothers earlier. Their story is just the beginning when it comes to the history of aviation.
You're right. While the Olympics were slowly opening up to women, aviation was going through its own dramatic changes. It's incredible how fast things moved from those humble beginnings at Kitty Hawk to the age of supersonic jets.
And the stories of the people who pushed those boundaries are just as fascinating, right? Like Amelia Earhart, her story really captures that pioneering spirit of early aviation.
Absolutely. Her constant drive to break barriers, to be the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, and then her attempt to fly around the world, it caught the world's imagination.
And even though her last flight ended in tragedy, her legacy continues to inspire. She reminds us that progress isn't always a straight line. It often has setbacks and even tragedies.
It's a good reminder that exploration and innovation always come with some risk, but those risks are often what push us to go further, to dream bigger. And it's not just about what individuals achieve either. We've seen amazing feats of teamwork in aviation too.
Like the Apollo 11 mission, landing the first humans on the moon in 1969. That was huge for humanity. I remember watching it on TV as a kid. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath.
It was a defining moment, not just for space exploration, but for human ingenuity as a whole. And to think that just a few decades before that, people were still amazed by the Wright brothers' 12-second flight.
It really puts the speed of progress into perspective. And talking about teamwork, we can't forget about the International Space Station. It's been continuously inhabited for over 20 years now. It's a marvel of engineering and international cooperation.
It's amazing to think we have a permanent human presence in space now. A real testament to what we can do when we work together. And it's not just about building impressive structures either.
Right. It's about pushing the limits of scientific discovery, understanding our place in the universe, and maybe even paving the way for future generations to go beyond Earth.
Exactly. And just like the Olympics, space exploration brings together people from all over the world, transcending national boundaries to chase a common goal.
It really shows the potential for humanity, the potential to achieve incredible things when we work together. And speaking of achieving the incredible, it's fascinating to think about all the other firsts in both aviation and Olympic history that we haven't even touched on yet.
Oh, there's so many stories out there. We could spend hours just scratching the surface. But there's one story that I find particularly interesting. It's the story of Eugene Jacques Bullard.
Eugene Jacques Bullard, I don't think I've heard of him. Who was he?
Well, back in 1917, he became the world's first black combat pilot. And get this, he did it by serving in the French Flying Corps because racial prejudice kept him out of the U.S. Army Air Corps.
Wow, that's incredible. To think someone could be so skilled, so determined, and yet be held back by the bigotry of the time. It's a powerful reminder of how far we've come in terms of social progress, but also how important it is to keep fighting for equality and inclusion.
It's a story that you see throughout both aviation and Olympic history, this constant fight for recognition and equality. We've seen it time and time again. from women fighting for their right to compete, to athletes of color breaking down racial barriers, to people with disabilities demanding their rightful place on the world stage. It reminds us that progress is often hard-won, and that the fight for justice is a journey that never really ends.
And it's a fight worth having, even when it's tough. Because ultimately, we're all aiming for the same thing, a world where everyone has the chance to reach their full potential, whether it's in the skies or on the playing field.
Well said. And speaking of reaching full potential, we haven't even touched on some of the more recent achievements in both aviation and the Olympics. The technological advancements in aviation are mind-blowing, and the athletic feats we're seeing in the Olympics are pushing the limits of what humans can do.
It's true. It feels like every year, records are broken and new milestones are reached. It's almost hard to keep up with how fast things are progressing. It really is amazing to think about how far we've come in such a short amount of time. It's almost like watching evolution happen at warp speed.
It's not just about the technology or the athletic records being broken either. It's also about the evolution of ideas, the changing perspectives, and the expanding definition of what's possible.
That's a really great point. It's easy to get caught up in the what of progress, the faster planes, the higher jumps, the longer distances. But the why is just as important, if not more so.
Exactly. Why do we try to fly higher? To run faster, to go beyond what we thought was possible? I think it's because deep down humans are driven by curiosity, a desire to explore, to challenge ourselves, to push the boundaries of what we know and what we believe we can achieve.
I think you're right. Both aviation and the Olympics really embody that spirit of pushing boundaries. They're both places where we see the amazing potential of the human spirit.
And it's not just about individual achievements either. Think about the global collaboration involved in projects like the International Space Station, or the coordination and logistics of putting on the Olympic Games. These things need the combined effort of thousands, if not millions, of people from all over the world.
It's true. It really shows what humanity can do when we put our minds and resources together. And speaking of incredible things, there's something I've been wondering about. We've talked about so many inspiring firsts today. But what about the ones that haven't happened yet? What do you think the future holds for both aviation and the Olympics?
That's the big question, isn't it? If history has taught us anything, it's that predicting the future is a fool's game. But I do think there are some clues we can find by looking at the past.
Like what? What patterns or trends do you see that might give us a peek into what's next?
Well, one trend that's definitely happening is the increasing speed of technological innovation. Things are changing faster than ever before, and that's definitely going to impact both aviation and the Olympics.
So we can expect to see even more mind-blowing advancements in aircraft design and athletic performance.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. But I think it's bigger than just faster planes and stronger athletes. We're right on the edge of some truly groundbreaking technologies. Technologies that could completely change our relationship with flight and sports.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, in aviation, we're seeing things like electric and hybrid aircraft, autonomous drones, and even the very beginning of space tourism. These things have the potential to completely change transportation, to make air travel more accessible and sustainable, and even open up new frontiers for humans to explore.
Wow, it's amazing to think about all those possibilities. What about the Olympics? How do you think technology will shape the future of the Games?
Well, we can already see the impact of technology on things like athlete training, performance analysis, and even judging. But I think we're only just getting started. Imagine a future where virtual and augmented reality are part of the Olympic experience, allowing fans to immerse themselves in the games in ways we can only dream of right now.
That would be amazing. It would be like having front row seats to every event, no matter where you are in the world. And who knows, maybe we'll even see new Olympic events that use these new technologies.
That's definitely possible. We might see competitions in drone racing, esports, or even virtual reality simulations of traditional sports. The possibilities are truly endless.
It's mind-blowing to think about all the changes coming our way. But besides the technological advancements, are there any other trends you see shaping the future of aviation and the Olympics?
One thing that's becoming more and more clear is that both fields are dealing with issues of sustainability and social responsibility. In aviation, there's a growing focus on reducing carbon emissions and finding more sustainable fuels. And in the Olympics, there's a push for more diversity, inclusion, and gender equality.
It's good to see these conversations happening. It shows that we're becoming more aware of the impact these industries have on the world, and that we're trying to make them more fair and sustainable for future generations.
It's a crucial change in how we think. We're moving beyond just pushing boundaries and achieving firsts to a more complete understanding of what progress really means. It's about creating a future where innovation is balanced with responsibility, and where the benefits of these advancements are shared more fairly.
That's a powerful message. And it brings us back to something you said before about the why behind our pursuit of progress. It's not just about breaking records or reaching new heights. It's about using our creativity and teamwork to make a better world for everyone.
That's the ultimate goal, right? And I think both aviation and the Olympics can play a big part in that. They show us what's possible when we push beyond our limits, work together across borders, and strive for something bigger than ourselves.
And those glimpses can be so inspiring, can't they? They remind us of the power of the human spirit and the potential we have to shape the future.
They do. And I think that's the most important thing to remember from all of this. The future isn't set in stone. It's something we create together through our choices, our actions, and our shared will.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a feeling of awe and responsibility. Awe at what humans have already accomplished, and a sense of responsibility for what we'll do next.
I totally agree. And to everyone listening, I encourage you to embrace that feeling of awe and responsibility. The future is full of possibilities, and it's up to each of us to play a part in shaping it.
Well said. So to everyone listening, take a moment to think about those firsts, those moments that redefined what was possible, and then ask yourself, what's next? What boundaries are you going to push? What dreams are you going to chase? Because the future is waiting to be written, and it's up to each of us to make our mark.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving. The sky, as they say, is not the limit when there are footprints on the moon.
And on that inspiring note, it's time to wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the history of flight in the Olympics. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of knowledge and discovery.
Yeah, and it's like watching evolution in fast forward, isn't it?
It really is.
And it's not just about like the tech getting better or the athletes breaking records. It's about how ideas evolve too, how our perspectives change and how what we think is possible keeps expanding.
That's such a good point. It's easy to get caught up in like the what of progress, like faster planes, higher jumps, longer distances, but the why is just as important.
Exactly. Why do we try to fly higher, run faster? Why do we always want to go further than we thought possible? I think it's because deep down, humans are just curious. We have this desire to explore and challenge ourselves, to push the limits of what we know and what we think we can do.
I think you're right. Aviation and the Olympics both really show that spirit of pushing boundaries. They're both places where we get to see the amazing potential of what humans can do.
And it's not just about individual achievements either. Think about the global collaboration that goes into something like the International Space Station, or the insane coordination and logistics it takes to put on the Olympic Games. These things need thousands, maybe even millions of people from all over the world working together.
It's true. It really highlights what humanity can achieve when we pool our brains and resources. And speaking of achieving incredible things, there's something I've been thinking about. We've talked about so many inspiring firsts today. But what about the firsts that are still out there? What do you think the future holds for aviation in the Olympics?
That's the million-dollar question, right? If history has taught us anything, it's that predicting the future is pretty much impossible. But I do think there are some hints we can pick up from looking back.
Like what kind of patterns or trends do you see that might give us a glimpse into what's next?
Well, one trend that's impossible to ignore is the increasing speed of technology. Things are changing faster than ever, and that's going to have a huge impact on both aviation and the Olympics.
So we can expect to see even more mind-blowing advancements in planes and athletic performance.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. But I think it goes even further than just faster planes and stronger athletes. We're on the verge of some seriously transformative technologies. Technologies that could completely change how we think about flight and sports.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, so in aviation, we're seeing things like electric and hybrid planes, we've got autonomous drones, and we're even starting to see the very beginnings of space tourism. These things have the potential to totally revolutionize transportation, make flying more accessible and sustainable, and even open up new frontiers for human exploration.
Wow, it's incredible to think about all the possibilities. What about the Olympics? How do you see technology changing the future of the Games?
Well, we already see how technology is being used in athlete training. in performance analysis and even judging. But honestly, I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. Imagine a future where virtual and augmented reality are just a normal part of the Olympics. Fans could immerse themselves in the games in ways we can't even imagine right now.
That would be incredible. It would be like having front row seats to every event no matter where you are. And who knows, maybe we'll even see new Olympic events that use these new technologies.
It's definitely possible. We might see drone racing, esports, or even virtual reality versions of traditional sports as Olympic events. The possibilities are pretty much endless.
It's mind-blowing to think about all the changes that are coming. But beyond technology, are there any other trends that you see shaping the future of aviation in the Olympics?
Well, one thing that's becoming really clear is that both fields are wrestling with the ideas of sustainability and social responsibility. In aviation, there's a big focus on reducing their carbon footprint and finding greener fuels. And in the Olympics, there's a push for more diversity and inclusion and gender equality.
That's good to hear. Those conversations are important. It shows that we're starting to understand the impact these industries have on the world, and that we're trying to make them fairer and more sustainable for the future.
It's a really important change in how we think. We're moving past just trying to break records and achieve firsts, and toward a more complete idea of what progress really means. It's about creating a future where innovation goes hand in hand with responsibility, and where everyone benefits from these advancements.
That's a powerful message. And it circles back to something you said earlier about the why behind our desire for progress. It's not just about breaking records or reaching new heights. It's about using our creativity and our ability to work together to build a better world for everyone.
That's the ultimate goal, right? And I think both aviation and the Olympics have a big role to play in achieving that. They show us what we can do when we push past our limits, work together across borders, and aim for something bigger than ourselves.
And those glimpses of what's possible are so inspiring, aren't they? They remind us of the power of the human spirit and the potential we all have to shape the future.
They do. And honestly, I think that's the most important thing to take away from all of this. The future isn't set in stone. It's something we create together through our choices, our actions, and our shared determination.
So, as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I'm left feeling a sense of awe and responsibility. Awe at everything humans have already accomplished, and a sense of responsibility for what we do next.
I couldn't agree more. And to everyone listening, I encourage you to really embrace that feeling of awe and responsibility. The future is full of possibilities, and it's up to all of us to shape it.
Well said. So to everyone listening, take a minute to think about those firsts, those moments that changed what people thought was possible. And then ask yourself, what's next for you? What boundaries are you going to push? What dreams are you going to chase? Because the future is waiting to be written. And it's up to each of us to make our mark on it.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep striving. You know what they say? The sky is not the limit when there are footprints on the moon.
And on that inspiring note, it's time to wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through the history of flight and the Olympics. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of knowledge and discovery.
And you know, it really makes you think about all the amazing things that are still to come. Like, what kind of firsts will we see in the next 100 years of flight in the Olympics?
You know, that's a really interesting question to ponder. It's exciting to think about all the possibilities, right?
It is.
And it reminds us that we're all part of this ongoing story of exploration and innovation.
Absolutely. Whether we're pushing the boundaries of technology or testing the limits of human potential, we're all contributing to the legacy of human achievement.
I love that, and I think that's a perfect note to end on. So to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the history of flight and the Olympics. We hope you've enjoyed exploring these incredible stories of human ingenuity and perseverance.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of knowledge and discovery.